Thousands of Argentinians took to the streets of Buenos Aires this weekend to protest against prosecutors' request to jail Vice President Cristina Kirchner for 12 years for alleged corruption. That's what we're discussing today. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome to another LATAM This Week from the Brazilian Report. I'm editor Euan Marshall, and as always, when the subject's Argentina, today we're talking to our Buenos Aires correspondent Ignacio Portes, who's just back from his holidays. Did you miss us, Ignacio?
Well, it's good to be back, Euan. I think I came back right in time for what happened in the weekend.
Exactly. And yeah, just before we get into the meat and bones of this week's discussion, I'd just like to make a quick shout out for the Brazilian Report, which is the news website that is behind these videos, our Explaining Brazil podcast, and of course, lots more. As you may know, we're funded entirely by subscriptions, so support from our readers, listeners, and viewers is hugely important to us. If you like our content, drop a like on this video, subscribe to our channel, but check us out at Brazilian.report. Our subscription plans start as low as $3 a month, and we've got a new introductory offer as well, which gives you complete access to the website for just $1 for your first month. So check out Brazilian.report/subscribe. So, Ignacio, prosecutors in Argentina requested a 12-year jail sentence for Vice President Cristina Kirchner on alleged corruption. So just to start off, tell us a bit about this case and what is Kirchner deemed to have done wrong.
Right. So the case that Prosecutor Luciani brought forward in the last few days, in a final speech that lasted 9 days exactly, accusing Mrs. Kirchner, is to deal to public works during the Kirchnerite era. Basically to the construction of roads in the province of Santa Cruz in the Patagonia region where the Kirchner family comes from. The allegation basically says that 85% of the contracts, of the public works contracts in that province were handed out to a contractor, a businessman that was friendly with the Kirchnerite family. He was a close friend of the late Nestor Kirchner. Lázaro Báez, the name of this businessman. And Lázaro Báez is a name who has already been tied to other corruption cases in Argentina. He has been jailed. His family, his entourage have all faced pretty well proven corruption allegations. But the difference is here the accusations reach the top, reach Cristina Kirchner, as opposed to in other of the cases against Lázaro Báez. The accusations are tied to overpricing, favoring him in the distribution of the contracts, and also giving some handbacks to the Kirchner family and to allies of the government.
And so, is there any evidence of her direct involvement at this stage? What's her side to the story here?
Right. This is where the big problem comes, because although proving corruption against Lázaro Báez is already something that can be done on pretty solid grounds, because on the last few years there's been videos, testimony, all kinds of stuff against him. Proving anything against Cristina Kirchner is much harder. Really, it seems to come down to what you see in many mafia movies about: is the wife of someone that commits a crime actually responsible? Right, like is Carmela Soprano guilty in the same way as Tony Soprano? Because Nestor Kirchner handled the dirty side of business often in Argentina when these public contracts were discussed, when there were kickbacks needed to finance political campaigns, which is how campaigns are financed very frequently in Argentina and in many Latin American countries by contributions from businessmen that are not always legal and declared. Well, Nestor Kirchner handled most of this, and Cristina was shielded by him mostly. But Nestor Kirchner died in 2010, and the opposition has been focused, you can allege, for political reasons and not so much for cleanliness reasons, against Cristina Kirchner, trying to find a case against her to finally prove that her government was not clean, that she is a figure that should be repudiated in Argentine politics. There have been many cases against her, many of them not very well fundamented. So there's this feeling that that the allegations are biased, that is politically motivated, a little bit like what happened with Lula in Brazil. That maybe it's not so much looking to clean up politics in the country, but targeting a popular politician from that is liked by the poor people of the country and that opposes the country's elites and so forth. So this is where you get this dynamic of backers of Cristina going to the streets to defend her, and her speaking publicly saying the judges and the prosecutors won't listen to me because they are friends with the opposition, and so the only recourse I have is talking to the public and telling my side of the story and explaining why this case is biased against me. But I don't trust justice. I don't trust courts. I trust that only people can be fair in their judgment, and because the courts are just persecuting, right? This is the conflict right now, that we're seeing in the country.
Yeah, and I mean, just from what you're explaining there, definitely recognize a lot of parallels to Brazil during the legal troubles that former President Lula faced. I mean, it seemed like the whole issue was based on your political allegiances as opposed to the case itself. For one side, he was, completely innocent. There was absolutely no way that he could have been involved in anything like that. And for the other side, he was unbelievably guilty. And also this idea that you've mentioned with this case is that it seems to be some of the accusations are purely because she was president at the time. Cristina Kirchner was president at this time was going on. So something which we heard repeated a lot in Brazil, not only towards Lula, but also for Dilma Rousseff, his successor, was like, well, right. They were the president, so they had to know. That sort of
right, exactly. Cristina Kirchner is being accused of heading a criminal conspiracy. And the way in which prosecutor Luciani is proving this, or is trying to prove this, is that she was the president. But there's no direct communications, or I don't know, an intervened communication via the phone, or some testimony that says, okay, Cristina ordered me to do this, which is not the same case, which doesn't happen with her late husband. There are testimonies tying him to corruption, saying he was actually the mastermind of some of the schemes, but the basis to put her at the top of a criminal conspiracy is she was the president. And what analysts closer to the government are saying is, okay, this way, if anyone is corrupt in a government, the president has to go to jail, and it's impossible to rule in a huge country like Brazil or like Argentina. Someone is going to be corrupt somewhere. Okay, these people are actually pretty close to Cristina. It's not that she was completely innocent or that she didn't know anything about what was happening, probably, but that's not how courts work, right? You have to actually prove that someone is guilty before throwing them in jail, and prove that she had a material role in committing a crime, and not that she was close politically to someone that benefited or something like that. So there is a political aspect to this, and Cristina has tried to highlight this all the time, showing that she spoke before this protest on the weekend. She spoke in TV. She gave like a soliloquy, giving her side of how she views things, and she said, okay, the Macri family and friends of the Macri family, Macri, former president of Argentina and the main figure of the opposition, arguably, they also come from the world of public works, and they are also have a history of corruption. And even if you look at the evidence that the prosecutor filed against me, you can see members of the Macri family or friends of Macri talking to the people or to the corrupt people that you say are linked to me. So why don't you also investigate the links with Macri or with his family and all his public works empire that made him his family rich? So she sees that there is a focus on a particular province, her province, on the links to the presidency when she was at the top, and that's the view of the Kirchners, that it doesn't matter really if she was corrupt or not, that she's being punished not for what she did or what she didn't do, but in terms of corruption, but from what she did in politics, for opposing the people that hold power in the business circles of Argentina.
Right. Yeah. And also, just as you mentioned before, this doesn't seem to be the first time that Cristina Kirchner has been dragged into these kind of corruption allegations, right? I mean, have you got some kind of high-profile examples you could go over for us?
Yes, the most notable, which has been talked about in the last few weeks, was the accusation that she helped cover up a bombing against a Jewish center that happened in Argentina in 1994, which was a very far-fetched allegation that another prosecutor made against her in the year 2015, Prosecutor Nisman, who then appeared dead in his department and became a very famous case and started all kinds of conspiracy theories that Cristina actually killed him and stuff like that. But I mean, the position of the government is that he killed himself because he actually accused Cristina of corruption with no proof, and he had to go to Congress the next day and was going to be humiliated by the questions when he would have no answers to the refutations of his allegations. So yeah, there were many very high profile cases discussing corruption in the Kirchner era, but this one has a little more meat in the bone, right? The accusing Cristina of covering up the bombing of the Jewish center was, I mean, there was a lot of exaggeration in the position. It was a very politically charged thing, but you can actually tie the Kirchners to corruption in public works. That's easier to do. So it's it's more easy to sustain something like this. So. And Cristina cannot say, okay, it was my husband, so it wasn't me, because that destroys her politically. She cannot say that. So she's in a complicated place right now. And of the many cases that were opened against her, many of them politically motivated, I think this one is among the most solid, and she is likely to face real trouble in this one in the long term. Yeah.
And yeah, so I mean, another part of this discussion I wanted to go into was what happened at the weekend. But before we continue, I'd just like to give another shout out to the Brazilian report. And I've mentioned our subscription levels or memberships. But if you're not keen on subscribing, or maybe if you're already a member and you want to know how else you can support us, you can leave us donations at Buy Me a Coffee. And there we've set up special membership plans as well for regular supporters. So that means that you can tip us a few coffees each month and you get access to special newsletters, behind the scenes content, all that lovely stuff. So check out buymeacoffee.com/Brazilian report to find out more. And right, so Ignacio, this request for Cristina Kirchner to be jailed, that came last week. But let's, tell us what happened over the weekend then in Buenos Aires.
Right. Well, as we have discussed previously, the focus in Argentina was elsewhere in the last few weeks. It was on the economic crisis, the change of economy ministers, and so on. But this put the vice president at the top of the agenda again. And I think what happened was that the very demoralized Kirchnerite base that had not been rallying in the streets, had not been showing their support for a government that was looking pretty weak and ineffective lately. All these people were recharged, remotivated again to come to help their leader, because even if she's the vice president, she is seen as the political leader of this space for most supporters of the government. And the accusations of Prosecutor Luciani. And the something that we didn't mention yet, the request to ban her from holding office, which is very important, because it seemed like a proscription, like what happened to Lula too in Brazil, right? Well, this recharged the supporters of Cristina, and they surrounded her apartment in the Recoleta neighborhood in Buenos Aires, which is a very posh neighborhood. Where people usually residents often vote against Peronist candidates. Is people like Macri get 70-80% of the vote in that region. Well, that area where Cristina Kirchner has an apartment and she lives in the city was surrounded by supporters of Cristina, and they made very noisy protest for many days in Argentina, a very typical Peronist act in which the areas that are often seen as rich or old money or traditional are flushed with people that are seen as hordes or of protesters that cannot be contained, and that wreak havoc in an area that should be often quiet and bourgeois, let's say. So after a few days of protest and noise and fireworks and people demanding that the city police that is controlled by the opposition do something to stop them, Buenos Aires Mayor Horacio Rodríguez Larreta, who is an ally of Macri, decided to put a barricade stopping people from going to Cristina Kirchner's apartment. And this only intensified the protest, and people tried to pass through the barricades, clash with the police. Even the police had a clash with Maximo Kirchner, the son of Cristina, who tried to visit her in her apartment as he would normally do, and the police were saying, no, you cannot go here. They even insulted him. The police, there's pictures of policemen insulting Maximo, calling him a faggot, saying, no, you cannot come here. So it all escalated very rapidly, and by the end of the day, the Buenos Aires mayor was speaking and accusing Kirchnerites of provoking violence, and Cristina was also speaking, came down from her house to speak in the streets. They improvised a platform, and she spoke to her support and saying, okay, you have to go home, like trying to pacify things a little bit, but saying that I am being persecuted, and this is an attempt to ban Peronism from public life again, like it happened in the past. For 18 years, Peronism was banned a long time ago in the 50s and 60s. So there were very strong accusations from one side to the other, and very strong scenes, police repression, tear gas, all in an area of the city that is often very quiet and very peaceful. So it was a very intense weekend, and what's worrying maybe is that in the coming future, if such an important political figure is seen as banned from politics, that these scenes could continue, right? That people will not see a future government as legitimate if Cristina cannot run for office against them, if it's like Bolsonaro won without competing against Lula, if Macri or Larreta or whoever in the opposition wins without competing against Cristina, will people see that as a legitimate government? Will there be more rioting in the streets? Add to that there's an economic crisis. Is this a recipe for more chaos in the streets in Argentina, for more polarization? Well, it opens up Pandora's box, right? The conflict we're seeing, and I think what we saw in the weekend could be a warning sign about problems to come in the future.
And it's just quite interesting to me because, I mean, she's facing this heat from prosecutors, but she's also still able to mobilize like thousands of people to go to the streets and defend her. So, just if you could like define for us just how popular she is in Argentina and what is her importance in this current government.
Right. Well, she was the kingmaker of the current government. That's a good way of putting her. She decided who the president was going to be. She picked this more moderate figure in Alberto Fernandez, who was a critic of her in the past, although even earlier she was a member of the early Kirchner governments. And what Cristina has is that she has a very strong base of supporters, maybe 30%, 35% of the country in areas such as the poor north of the country or the outskirts of Buenos Aires province, where the working class most commonly resides. Those people still support Cristina, but her popularity has dwindled from the years like 2011, when she got more than half of the votes when she was reelected as president. She's not as popular as she once was, and she has a very, very negative image amongst the people who don't like her. So she's like very popular in 1/3 of the country, but maybe the 2 other thirds really, really dislike her. So it's very hard to vote her into office by herself. It's very hard for her to win a presidency. So she has to create these alliances with people like Alberto Fernandez to show a more moderate image or something like that. But right now, everyone every one of the allies that Cristina has managed to pull by her side has a pretty negative image associated with her negative image. So it's hard to for her to get elected again, and the opposition has the upper hand probably for the coming election. But she's still a very popular figure. It's still the one. I mean, she's probably the most intensely liked person in Argentine politics and the most intensely disliked person in Argentine politics. And so this creates this scenery in which one side maybe wants her as president, and the other side wants her banned from politics, wants her just completely out of the public conversation, out of not a legitimate person to talk with. They see her as a fanatic, as a person that cannot be reasoned with, and so on and so forth. So lots of people are happy to see her indicted or banned from office or jail or whatever. But other people are going to see this as illegitimate, and it's going to create this conflict, which is, it's going to be hard to find a way to keep everyone, if not happy, unless at least pacified. Like, okay, let's resolve this in a democratic manner, voting and accepting the winner. If a candidate is banned or a side feels that a candidate is not legitimate, it creates this irresolvable conflicts that could snowball in the future.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a few times in this particular video about the kind of comparisons to Brazil, but that particular segment sounded very, very close to home there. But okay, I think we'll leave it there for this week. Ignacio, thank you so much. Eye-opening, as always.
Thank you, Euan. It's been a pleasure to be back with you.
Excellent. And just before we go, just remember to drop a like on this video, subscribe to our channel, and click the little bell to make sure that you get notified whenever we post a new video. And of course, remember to check us out at Brazilian.report. I'm Euan Marshall, and thanks for watching.